Ramon Sosa is a boxer and a mentor with a heart of gold.
Parents would tell me that was the best thing that ever happened to their kid. Their grades went up, their self-esteem went up.
Outside of the ring, he meets his match.
Lulu was very attractive, long black hair. She was a knockout.
She was always dressed to the max with her high heels, her pretty dresses, that caught his eye.
But this brunette beauty can really pack a punch.
Her mother whispered in my ear, "She's your trouble now."
Ramon is forced into the fight of his life.
She was an attractive girl. She was pure evil inside.
She's putting our family at risk, have children. What kind of a monster is this?
I started boxing at about the age of 7 in Puerto Rico, and then finally moved to Texas, and I continued to box as a teenager. I competed over 100 amateur fights. Turned pro at the age of 17 when I was still in high school as a senior. It was something that I loved. As a fighter, I didn't look for fights. In the streets, if I saw trouble, I walked the other way.
In his 20s, Ramon marries and has 3 kids, but the union deteriorates over time.
I used to travel a lot. I had to go into a lot of tournaments, boxing tournaments around the nation. So it puts a lot of stress on a relationship.
In 2000, after 9 years together, Ramon's wife files for divorce.
When I first got divorced, I was really, really hurt. I didn't want to get divorced. I loved my kids. I wanted to keep my family together.
I grew up with my parents separated. Spent a lot of time with my dad on the weekends for a long time. I was his only little girl.
His children are his life. They're gonna come first. But I think he was ready to enjoy himself.
On a beautiful summer evening in 2007, Ramon heads to Mi Luna nightclub.
This guy had told me about this restaurant, The Woodlands, which is a neighborhood north of Houston. 10 in the evening, they played live music. I pulled out a little Versace sweater that I had, thought it was cool, looking nice. And I went out there, the place was packed, and I noticed this beautiful lady on the dance floor. She had long black hair, beautiful skin. I remember her wearing a tight black mini dress and high heels. She was a knockout. Next thing I know, I see her coming towards me, and she steps on my toe. I just went down in pain. She started telling me, "I'm sorry." I'm saying Spanish, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to, step on you," all that. And all I could do is look up at her and just say, "Would you dance with me?" So she kind of asked me what I did, and I told her that I work with kids and use boxing as a tool to keep kids on the right path. And she loved it. She said, "Oh, wow, that's excellent, man. You're helping kids, and I love boxing."
Maria Durantes, nicknamed Lulu, tells Ramon that she came from Mexico with her 2 children, Luis and Carla. She cleans houses to support her family.
She knew how to work hard so that she could make a living to better her life and her kids' life in this country. And I was very impressed by that.
He seemed happy. He's got this big old smile on his face all the time when she's around. I liked her a lot. I wanted to have her body. What do I have to do to look like that? And we got along fine.
As a man, you want to be treated right, and I treated her right too. It would just go way above and beyond for me. But it is when I get up in the morning, she had my full breakfast set on the table. I was her king.
My mother loved it. Someone's taking care of her son.
It progressed pretty quick because she started supporting me a lot in boxing. We dated for about a year and a half. And I was beginning to think, this is the right person for me. The day that I asked her to marry me, I went down to one knee, pulled the ring out of my back pocket, and she just started crying. And I asked her to marry me. And of course, she said yes. And she was so happy that I asked her to marry me. I proposed to her on that weekend, and the following week she was already making arrangements for our marriage.
We had no idea he was getting married. We didn't even know he was going to propose to her. I knew nothing about it. So that was like a gut punch. And I remember crying, and I was like, what?
We got married at the courthouse in Montgomery County. And then after that, we had a get-together at my sister's house. My older sister, Mari, she opened up her house for a celebration of our wedding. It was great having everybody over. My mother had cooked Puerto Rican food. We danced, and she danced with everybody, and her kids were there. Her mother, her brother-in-law, her sister. It was a great night of partying and celebration.
But not for everyone.
We all decided not to go. We were not interested. Nobody was happy about it. So my brothers and I stayed behind.
No, my kids did not come to my wedding. That was very difficult for me. I can't blame them for anything. It was all my fault. At that time, Lulu was starting to put a wedge between me and my kids.
It was a warning sign, but not the only one.
One red flag in hindsight that bothers me was the day of our marriage at the courthouse. Her mother came up to me and gave me a hug and just whispered in my ear, "Now she's your trouble," and walked away. And I didn't think much of it, but she was trying to tell me something from the beginning.
In 2010, Ramon and Lulu opened a gym together, Woodlands Boxing and Fitness.
Hi, my name is Ramon Sosa.
I am Lulu Sosa.
Welcome to Woodlands Boxing and Fitness.
I always wanted my own gym, and I had a vision on how to run it where it could be prosperous. She wanted our business to be successful, and she would tell me, I'm not stopping until we make this thing work smoothly and we're making money. It was all 100%. Let's do this and support each other.
He put a lot of energy, blood, sweat, and tears into that place.
I had a day job too, but then always had time for the gym because that was my biggest thing. We had to work during the day, and then training people till 8, 9 in the evening.
He was also, living out his dream. He had this so-called beautiful wife, he always would say, and he had it all.
We bought a big house, 2-story home. We had nice toys, and financially everything was great. And those were the happy times when she saw the money. She was very, very mindful of everything that was spent. I mean, every receipt had to be accounted for, everything. When it came to spending money on her and her kids, there was never an issue. But when it came to me spending anything on my kids, I don't know what it was that bothered her so much about Mia, that she just hated that every time I brought her into conversation. Mia was competing in a pageant, Miss Teen San Antonio. When I told Lulu that I was going to buy a dress for her, and I told her how much it was going to cost, oh my gosh, she just went through the roof. She said, well, why are you spending all that money on her for? She's not going to win anyway. I mean, who would say something like that, After our 3rd year of marriage, she applied for her American citizenship. And I remember going to the immigration office and signing a bunch of papers so that she can become an American citizen, her kids, and she even applied for her mother. So they were all becoming American citizens because of me. One afternoon, I get home and I see all these American flags, and it looks like there was a little party at the house. And she says, say hello to your new American citizen wife. And I was so upset. I said, wait, you mean to tell me that you guys had the celebration and you didn't invite me? I would ask her very bluntly, so let me get this straight. You came to this country for one reason only, to become an American citizen and become prosperous, get money, and now that you have it, you don't need me. She says, look at me. I'm beautiful. I can get any man I want, but I picked you. I picked you because I love you. I love everything about you. I could have had any man I want.
Now that I think about it, they were probably having issues. And he said, let me just take her on a trip to make her happy.
Ramon takes Lulu on a vacation to Puerto Rico to show her the island.
We having a good time. This particular evening, we were on the bed at the hotel. We were having drinks. She was going through the social media, and she sees a picture of my daughter, Mia. And she made a comment of, look at your daughter looking like a prostitute. I was like, what did she just say? She kept saying, well, look at her. She was like a little prostitute the way she's dressed.
They get into an argument, but to the point where, I'm gonna call you mother. Nothing she says to my mother is gonna upset her, but it upset Ramon that, why are you bothering my mother with this?
And she calls my mother, and I grabbed the phone away from her, saying, hang up the phone. I hang up the phone, and what does she do? She runs out of the room.
A few minutes later, there's a knock on the door.
So security comes up and asks what's going on. And then I see Lulu outside our door, the room door. I look at her, and I see that she has scratches on her hands and stuff. And I'm like, what happened to you? And I see that look in her face that she's up to something. There's something going on.
Lulu has made her first move in a high-stakes battle with Ramon that will put his life on the line.
She had a plan. From the very beginning, I believe she had a plan. She wasn't gonna give up easy.
She just knew how to manipulate people so easily, and I fell for it.
On vacation in Puerto Rico, Ramon Sosa is reeling. His wife Lulu complains to hotel security that he physically abused her during an argument.
Security guards stayed with me inside the room. He wanted to hear my version of the story while Lulu was outside with the other security guard. And the security guard that was with me in the room said, one of you guys is gonna have to sleep in a separate room tonight. And I never forget him telling me, watch out for that lady. The next morning after we had that incident in Puerto Rico, I was in the lobby, and then Lulu walked up to me and she had her luggage, and I noticed that she had some kind of paper and envelope, and she showed me that it was a report that she had written out of what happened the previous night. And I looked at it and I was very, very, very upset because it was all a lie. She was just trying to get me in trouble. In the plane, we were sitting next to each other, and I never forget, she fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, and then she had her hand crossed on her lap. I would just stare at her hands with those scratches, and I'm like, this is one crazy lady,
I think Ramon is one that always puts a good face to everything, and he wanted to make this work. He tried his best. I could see him putting a lot of effort into, things working out. I just saw more tension, less smiling, less getting together with everybody. And you could tell, you can see her facial expression that there was higher tension. Ramon too, you could see that they were trying to avoid each other.
Holding on to hope for his relationship, Ramon books a second vacation, this time to Mexico, so he and Lulu can visit her family.
She had detailed every location that we were supposed to go to, and she had specific places that she wanted to take me. There was one particular location that she had on the itinerary, a place called Tepito.
Ramon has never heard of Tepito, but he gets a gut instinct that it's a place he shouldn't visit.
Tepito, in Mexico City. Arguably the most dangerous black market in the world.
She told me that it was a location where there's a lot of poor people that live there, but you can find anything you want. There's a lot of knockoffs that people make there, and they're very cheap. And I was like, but why do you want to take me there? And thank God that we never went. And later on, I understand why.
Back in Texas, things go from bad to worse as the fighting continues.
I was at home with her son, and we got into a back and forth. He had issues. He had a lot of issues with school, misbehaving, and getting in trouble, hanging out with the wrong kind of people. So I was very, very tired of his shenanigans. You know, I never put a hand on him, but I got very, very close to him and it was on his face. And he just broke down, started crying, and went upstairs to his room. Later on that afternoon, Lulu walked into the house. I was just watching my boxing match. And out of nowhere, she throws a right hand. You know, in boxing, we have this saying that the punch that hurts the most is the punch that you don't see. She busted my lip. I believe she was looking for me to retaliate, to find a way to have me arrested or some kind of way have me taken out of the home. But I wasn't gonna hit her. So I just went to the bathroom and just stared at myself, looking at the blood, you know, coming down the side of my mouth, asking myself, what kind of relationship have I gotten myself into? And I believe that she just was using me, and there's no other way of putting it. And once she found a way to get, you know, everything she wanted from me, and as quick as she did, she said, I don't need you anymore.
From here, things escalate quickly.
You know, she started to spread false rumors about me to members around the gym, telling them that I was abusive, physical, mental, abusing her kids, that I was a drunk. And then she's telling parents of kids for my nonprofit, don't believe everything that I say. I'm embezzling money. I'm not what they think. It was just enough, you know, for me to say, you know what, this is not gonna work out. So finally, February 2015, I get served with divorce papers.
What's worse, Lulu still shows up at the gym every day.
Even though we were working in the same gym, and it was like oil and water.
Just when Ramon hits his lowest point, he reconnects with an old friend from the gym. His name is Mundo.
He wanted to be a boxer when he was young or be involved with boxing, but he never had the opportunity. He lived in the east side of Houston at the time when he was young, growing up, and he got involved with gangs. Then later on, he was in prison. But he's a very, very tough guy, you know, but when he came out of prison, he wanted to change his life. And when he became part of my team with the kids at the gym, the kids loved him. He changed his whole life around.
My dad, he would pick us up from school and then take us to the gym. That's how I met Mundo. He was just one of the guys my dad trained. I mean, he would talk to us, he was nice.
I think Mundo is someone that's real grateful to what Ramon, you know, did for him in the time that he was having difficulties. He appreciates the help Ramon gave him and the guidance.
But Lulu is about to test the limits of Mundo's loyalty.
She started helping us on the weekends. Once she found out how beneficial he was to us, she started liking Mundo. Lulu starts having a lot more conversations with Mundo.
It got his ears perked up when he starts hearing Lulu making fun of Ramon and, you know, saying all kinds of ugly things about Ramon.
I was driving home this particular morning and I get a phone call from Mundo. I answer it, I said, hey, what's going on, Mundo? And Mundo says, hey, Pops, I got some hard news for you. Lulu wants you dead. Mundo overheard Lulu's daughter telling Lulu that there was a kid in the gym that has a family member in Mexico that kills people for money. And Lulu responded by, you know, maybe we can use him. Mundo walked up to Lulu and asked her, you mean you want him to go away like this? He made the pistol sign. You know, you want him to go away like this? And she said, yeah. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, I got the people that can do the job. And she said, okay, let's talk.
But Mundo has a plan, and after they talk, he calls Ramon.
He said, all I'm gonna do is just have conversations with her, meet with her, and record everything. and see how far she's willing to go with it.
Ramon and his wife have been having difficulties. She called the police out there several times alleging domestic violence. And he called me one morning and said, Lulu's trying to find somebody to kill me. I had seen enough of this lady by that point to take this very seriously. My advice was hang up right now and call the sheriff, which he did.
I made an appointment with the sheriff department and talked to a deputy, and he basically said to me that, look, that's not enough evidence, you know. You guys are going through a divorce. She could be saying that just out of being upset, you know, with you. But if he's recording her and bring all those recordings in, and then you know, the DA can make a case out of it or find some kind of cause. But right now, it's just your word against hers.
Mundo starts recording. You know, she was making plans about life insurance. It's all greed. It's all greed. When I heard those tapes, I'm like, I can't believe it. I'm in shock.
There was one recording where she's laughing with Mundo and giggling, telling Mundo, like, hey, this is how I'm gonna cry when the police comes and tells me that he's dead. And she starts giggling. So she's already practicing how she's gonna cry. And another one that really bothered me was about the trip that we took to Mexico. She tells Mundo that the plan was that we were supposed to get abducted and they were gonna let Lulu go and they were gonna hold me for ransom and then take me away. The place where everything was gonna happen was gonna be in Tepito, a place that I didn't want to go to.
You know, I've seen the pictures. They seem very happy. But as I heard in one of the recordings, she mentions that she just didn't have the heart to disappear him while they were in Mexico.
And here I was having a great time with her family. And in her head, she was trying to find a way to have me killed. And this lady was very, very, very evil. Mundo came to the point where he had to ask her for money. He said, I'm gonna ask you for money for a gun to commit the crime. And I'm also gonna let her know that I have the people that are gonna do the job.
¿Qué pasó, Lulu? Nada, pues nomás ellos, bueno, con lo que usted ofreció, pues de perdido saben que todavía está en serio que quiere que lo maten, todo también.
Sí. No, sí, definitivo. O sea, de que se lo echen, que se lo echen. No vale madre, eso, ¿no? Y de que les voy a pagar.
Now, Ramon is pulled into Mundo's plan.
Mundo told me, look, you know, I need you to go buy a burner phone and we're gonna text back and forth and Lou's gonna think that you're the hitman. He told me, you know, how to talk gang, you know, that language that they talk. And that's what we did back and forth. I texted to her, are you ready? I need the money. I need at least $200 to buy the toy. And she said yes. It was intense. And the whole time she had no idea that it was me. And once Mundo got the $200, we thought that was enough evidence to take to the local police. When I told them the story, they separated us, me and Mundo. They heard his side of the story, they heard my side.
The Houston police bring Ramon and Mundo's evidence to the prosecutor's office.
I first heard about this case was when the Precinct 3 Constable's office came to set up a meeting with me to talk about it. Ramon had come to them and reported that his wife, Maria Sosa Lulu, was trying to kill him. That they felt that Ramon was credible. Ramon had some audio recordings between Mundo and Lulu. Anything that Ramon or Mundo brought us, a jury or a judge is going to look at it with an eye of suspicion because it's not coming from law enforcement. It's coming from the person who's actually involved in the case, who has every reason to be lying or who has every reason to set Lulu up.
Prosecutor Blackburn decides to reach out to the FBI.
They assign an FBI agent to work on the case with us. They have an officer that they want to use to do the undercover work that has experience doing it. He's a Spanish speaker. He looks the part. He plays the part. But not only that, they have all the equipment. They have the undercover equipment, the cameras, the microphones that you need, the vehicles, and the surveillance teams that you need when you run one of these operations. Until we can actually have Mundo introduce our hitman to Lulu and see what she does and see if she actually even participates, we really don't know what we have at this point. Once that did happen, it was a very quick meeting in the parking lot of an academy. Mundo and our undercover officer drove to the academy. There was about a 10-person surveillance team that was surrounding them, set up all over the parking lot. Mundo gets out and goes and speaks with Lulu. Everything's being recorded. Everything's being videotaped. It is a very fluid situation. Once they make contact with the target and they're speaking with them, you don't know how it's going to go. You don't want to entrap the person. So you have to be able to determine, is this someone that really wants this done? Or is this just a scared lady who doesn't know what to do and is at her wit's end because law enforcement hasn't helped her in the past? Does she really want him killed? Or does she just want him beaten up? Does she just want him scared? Our undercover was a big guy, long black hair, tattoos. She loved talking to him. You could tell she was flirting with him. It wasn't something that she was uncomfortable with at all. He asked her straight out, do you want us to just beat him up? Do you want us just to scare him? Because we can do that. Her automatic response was, no, he's making my life miserable.
Este güey lo quieres madreado, o quieres que lo quieres acabado, lo quieres muerto, o quieres que nos damos una putiza, o...
No, a mí me sirve más muerto que estar poniendo la vida.
Once we heard that, we knew that we were dealing with someone who really wanted her husband dead. Well, what makes this a solicitation of capital murder versus a solicitation of just murder is that you're willing to pay someone to kill Ramon. So we had to have what's called remuneration, something of value that Lulu was willing to give in order to have Ramon killed. In this case, the CI asked what she had. She was able to give us watches, keychains, a diamond-studded boxing glove of Ramon's. She offered to let us have Ramon's truck after we killed him. And then she even went to the ATM and got out, I believe it was $1,000 out of the ATM, and gave it to us. So at that point, she'd committed the offense.
Lulu wanted me dead as soon as possible. Her intentions were that I was murdered before the divorce was finalized, or else my kids would get everything. So she wanted me dead soon.
A lo mejor ellos dicen, ¿sabes qué? Ya, firmamos el divorcio. Ese es el problema.
Entonces lo quieres rápido, entonces.
Lulu Sosa has just crossed a line by offering money for a hit on her husband. But the prosecution wants an airtight case.
So one of the big hurdles that you always have in these type of cases, once you get them into court, is the defendant now saying, look, I never meant for this to happen. I was scared once I got myself involved. I didn't know what to do. And in this case, you don't have, your defendant's not a 6'5", 250-pound man. It's a small, petite, attractive female who's going to look good in front of a jury.
They told me, here's the deal, Ramon. Right now we have enough information, enough evidence to arrest Lulu. But the thing is that, she's a beautiful lady. She's a mother. She has never been in any trouble. And we don't want to take any chances of going to a jury trial and have one of the jurors feel sorry for her. We need this to be a slam dunk case.
Prosecutors tell Ramon that they need him to do one more thing to secure their case.
Depending on who your victim is and who your target is, you can stage their murder. I always want to try to put a photo that's a staged photo of their loved one in front of them to see what the reaction is.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I said, repeat that again? You're gonna take a picture of me dead. How is that gonna work? And he said, we're gonna put some makeup on, take a picture, and then we're gonna show it to her and record it. And that's gonna be the evidence that we're gonna show the jury, her reactions. They told me, I need you to go home and get clothes for 3 days because we're gonna hide you. We don't wanna take any chances of anybody knowing where you're at.
Reluctantly, Ramon Sosa agrees to stage his own death.
I find out that these guys have looked up how to make bullet wounds from a YouTube video they had watched the night before. And I couldn't believe it, but they made it look right. I remember traveling to the actual gravesite that authorities had already dug up to take the picture of me dead, thinking in the back of that SUV about my kids, my mother, my father, my family, how upset they were going to be once they found out that I had to fake my death so Lulu can get arrested. When they put me inside of the grave, they told me to put my hands behind my back, close my eyes, put my head at an angle where they can take pictures. And they even threw dirt on top of my head. I thought that was demeaning too, but that's what they had to do to look as real as possible.
2 weeks after first meeting, the undercover agent again meets up with Lulu, this time to provide proof of Ramon's death and record her reactions.
So it's just our undercover driving to the same location. We pull up, she jumps into his car, she's not scared, she's not upset, and he tells her that they were able to do it successfully. She asked him specifically, did he fight back? Was it painful? Was he scared? So they talk a little bit about the murder itself, and then he shows her the picture on his cell phone, and she starts smiling. And as she's about to leave, she says, he's really dead, he's not getting out of that hole. And our undercover told her, no, he's not, and that's when she basically raised the roof with her hands. I've never seen someone that joyous. When Lulu realized or believed that Ramon was finally dead, the expression that she had and what she did and how she acted, I've never seen that before.
I just happened to answer the phone at the office at the time that she called, and she said, Notice? And I was like, who is this? She goes, this is Lulu. And she says, I'm calling because a coworker of your brother's called me and told me that they haven't seen him. He has not been at work, and that's just not like him. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then, I started texting my brother and texting him and calling him. He would not answer. He would not text me back. Kind of started getting worried. Like, okay, what's going on? And then finally I told one of the managers, I said, look, I need to go home. I have an emergency. And by the time I got over there, the police, the ambulance, and everybody was there. We're like, okay, what happened?
That afternoon, detectives go into the boxing gym. They were investigating a missing persons report. And if she had any information about where he might be, just to see what her reaction would be and how she would act.
Okay, Detective Martinez, the constable's office. I had a few questions for you. Is there somewhere we can talk in private?
The evidence that we're getting is so we can show a judge and a jury how manipulative she is, how cunning she is, how cold she is, and how good of a liar she is.
Mr. Sosa hasn't been to work today?
That's what they told me. I received a call today from Byron, and that's his friend.
His friend at work?
At work.
Okay. When's the last time you saw Mr. Sosa?
She now knows that she's standing in front of two detectives. They're questioning her about her husband's disappearance. That's the first time you see her getting rattled, getting nervous, shuffling through papers.
Wednesday 15th, the last day.
That's the last time you saw him?
That's the last time I saw. Then I contact Norris Kenya. This is Ramon's sister. This is her number, but she hung up the phone. Like,
this is his sister?
Yes.
Okay.
It's like, hey, Norris, listen, Byron called me this morning. So I just...
She's still playing the part.
Okay, Miss Sosa, stand up, please. You're under arrest. Okay, you're under arrest.
Why?
Ma'am, it's okay. No, vamos a...
Háblale a Julio, por favor, está...
Ramon Sosa is still in hiding when he gets the news from the police.
Then I got the call. They had arrested her. And when I got that call, it was a mixture of emotions. I sat on the edge of the bed, tears started coming down my eyes, and I couldn't explain why. I don't know if there were tears of happiness or tears of anger.
Ramon's family is still in the dark and has no idea where he is.
Ramon never told me what the plan was. So I'm like, why is she looking for Ramon? I start calling Ramon, paging Ramon, he's not calling me back. I'm starting to really worry.
They brought me back to the police station. My story was headline news in Houston.
Hitman to kill her husband.
Who, the investigators he was working with, Sosa met with the undercover agent again.
As soon as I got, my phone back, I tried to call my mother.
There was breaking news on TV with Lulu's face on it saying hired to kill in Montgomery County.
41-year-old Maria Sosa is behind bars after deputies say she tried to hire a hitman to kill her husband.
My mom was hysterical.
And my father answered the phone. And in the background, I could hear my mother crying. Just, the kind of cry you hear at funerals. And it was very difficult to hear my mother, the way she was just crying and crying. She thought that Lulu had killed me.
And then everybody started coming, and my brother got there, and he started crying, and then Mundo got there.
When my mom saw Mundo come in the door, she just ran to him, hugged him, and thanked him, and she was saying to him, thank you so much, Mundo, for saving my son's life.
The Sosa family rejoices in the moment, but is Ramon truly out of danger? No one knows if Lulu will send someone else after him.
For the next few weeks, I would sleep in my own bed with a loaded shotgun, and I had a 9mm gun loaded in my vehicle. I was like a ticking bomb at all times. I didn't know what to expect. I was very, very upset, and anything could set me off. I was afraid of myself, to be honest with you.
The next ordeal for the Sosa family is facing Lulu in court.
So once she's been taken into custody and charged with solicitation of capital murder, now the prosecution of her happens. Her case gets filed into court. Is she going to plead guilty? Is she going to want a trial? And how much time she's going to spend in prison?
I remember going to her first court hearing. It brought me back to how she used to dress all the time when we went out, and how she loved wearing nice clothes, nice heels all the time. She looked, always spectacular. She loved people to notice her when she walked in the room.
Sad to see this beautiful woman in this jumpsuit. It breaks my heart. I don't wish that on anybody, to see somebody all chained up like that.
So after the defense came and was able to review all of the evidence against her, they came asking for an offer. And we were eventually able to agree to allow her to plead to solicitation of murder and receive a sentence of 20 years in prison.
There's so much evidence against her that if she would have tried to go to a jury trial, I think she would have received life in prison. She never looked at me once. In all the hearings that I went to, she never looked at me once. Her last hearing, when she was sentenced, the judge let me speak. And I remember saying to the people that were there, nobody in here is perfect. We have all made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. And I told Lulu, I forgive you. I told her, I forgive you.
I just couldn't believe that he was saying that he could forgive her and that he was gonna be okay and that he's gonna move on. And how do you say that to somebody who just planned to have you murdered? But that was his way of moving forward, and that helped me move forward as well.
Once I forgave her. I was able to walk out of that courtroom in peace. The last thing I remember was the sound of the chains of it as she walked away.
Ramon's done a really good job of working with the parole board and with the Texas Department of Corrections and protesting her parole on multiple occasions. She has not received parole and she's still in prison. Hopefully she's learned her lesson. The likelihood that she'll do it again or try to do it again is very minimal, but you never want to say never.
After Lulu was arrested, people were scared to come back to the gym, so the memberships dropped tremendously.
In 2017, Ramon closes the gym and files for bankruptcy. But even losing his dream doesn't dim his enthusiasm for his new life.
I was able to write a book. I walked to my own grave. It has also helped me a lot. Writing that book, it's been great to use my story for something positive. And that means a lot to me now. My relationship with my kids is a lot better now. With Mitchell, with Chris, and with Mia. I try to talk to them in just about every day. That wedge that Lulu created between us, it was very difficult. And again, I can't blame nobody but myself. It hasn't been easy, but it has gotten a lot better. I have 3 grandkids now. They're my life.
He's doing so much better, and he's so happy. His best is yet to come.
I am wonderfully in love with someone now. I'm engaged. Life is great for me now. And I will forever, ever be indebted to Mundo.
The night swallowed her without warning. One moment, the streetlights were still humming softly over a quiet Texas suburb, insects buzzing in the thick summer air, the smell of hot asphalt clinging to the ground. The next, she was simply gone. No scream, no struggle, no shattered glass, just an absence so sudden, so complete, that it felt unreal. In the morning, her front door stood slightly open, swaying gently in the breeze. Inside, her purse lay untouched on the kitchen counter. Her car remained parked in the driveway. Her phone was charging beside the bed, its screen dark, waiting for a call that would never come. And in the stillness of that empty house, a cold case was born. Texas, 2003. A year already heavy with fear, shadowed by violence, shaped by the uneasy sense that danger could arrive quietly, without notice. Yet nothing prepared this small community for what they were about to face. Because when she disappeared, she took more than her own life into the dark. She took the town's sense of safety. She took their sleep. She took their certainty that evil always announced itself. Her name was Rachel Miller, 26 years old, a graduate student, a waitress on weekends. Known for her easy laugh, her restless ambition, and her stubborn refusal to give up on people, even when they disappointed her. She lived alone in a modest duplex on the edge of town, just far enough from the city lights that the nights were quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every sound feel too loud. The last confirmed sighting of Rachel came just before 10:30 p.m. at the diner where she worked. A co-worker remembered her clocking out, tying her hair back, joking about the unbearable heat. Another recalled her stepping outside, squinting against the glare of the parking lot lights, then climbing into her faded blue sedan. She should have been home by 10:45. She never made it. By sunrise, worry had already curdled into panic. When Rachel failed to answer her phone, missed her morning class, and didn't show up for her second shift, friends drove to her apartment. What they found sent a jolt of dread through the neighborhood. The door ajar, the silence, the untouched purse, and the unmistakable feeling that something had gone horribly, irrevocably wrong. Police arrived within minutes. Patrol cars blocked off the narrow street. Detectives combed through the small duplex, searching for any sign of forced entry, any disturbance, any clue that could explain how a young woman could vanish from her own home without leaving a trace. There was nothing. No blood. No broken locks. No overturned furniture. Her bed was neatly made. Her clothes folded in careful stacks, her wallet untouched. Even her shoes were still lined up by the door. It was as if she had stepped outside for a moment and been erased. By noon, word had spread. Reporters gathered at the yellow tape. Neighbors whispered in clusters. Parents pulled their children inside. The phrase cold case had not yet been spoken, but fear already curled in every conversation. Detectives canvassed the area. They knocked on doors, retraced Rachel's route from the diner, reviewed grainy security footage from gas stations and traffic cameras. But in 2003, technology offered little clarity. The footage was blurred. The angles were poor. Faces dissolved into shadows. One camera captured a sedan similar to Rachel's heading toward her street at 10:41 p.m. Another showed nothing. No one reported screams. No one heard a struggle. No one saw a suspicious vehicle. It was as if the night itself had swallowed her whole. As hours turned into days, the investigation intensified. Search teams scoured nearby fields, drainage ditches, wooded patches, and abandoned buildings. Helicopters hovered overhead, their rotors slicing through the thick Texas air. Volunteers formed long human chains, stepping carefully through tall grass, eyes fixed on the ground, praying not to find what they feared most. But the land offered no answers. Only silence. Only heat. Only the relentless ticking of time. Within a week, the case consumed the town. Candlelight vigils filled the streets. Her face stared out from flyers taped to telephone poles, storefront windows, and school doors. "Have you seen me?" the captions pleaded. Yet despite the scale of the effort, progress was painfully slow. The first lead came from an unexpected place. A woman living 2 blocks from Rachel's home reported hearing a car engine rev aggressively around 10:45 p.m., followed by what she thought might have been a muffled shout. At the time, she dismissed it as a drunken argument, nothing more. Only after seeing Rachel's photo on the evening news did the memory sharpen, transforming into a possibility too disturbing to ignore. Detectives seized on it. They mapped traffic patterns. They tracked vehicle registrations. They pulled phone records. They reconstructed timelines down to the minute. Still, nothing fit. Rachel had no known enemies. No history of risky behavior. No ties to criminal circles. Her ex-boyfriend had an alibi. Her coworkers checked out. Her friends passed polygraph tests. The investigation stalled. Weeks stretched into months. The flyers faded. The candles burned out. News vans departed. Life, as it always does, began to move forward. But the case did not move with it. Instead, it sank into the slow, suffocating category that haunts law enforcement. Unresolved disappearance. Unsolved crime. Cold case. By the end of the year, Rachel's file was already thick with dead ends. Tips poured in, but most were vague, unreliable, or cruel hoaxes. Sightings from other states. Rumors of trafficking rings. Anonymous calls that led nowhere. Each new lead sparked a surge of hope. Each collapse left the investigators more hollow. Inside the evidence room, boxes labeled with her name stacked higher, gathering dust. Her parents aged visibly under the weight of uncertainty. Her mother stopped sleeping through the night. Her father drove the highways endlessly, scanning faces at truck stops, convinced he might glimpse his daughter in the crowd. They refused to accept the word cold. Cold implied finality. And nothing about Rachel's disappearance felt final. Years passed. Technology advanced. New detectives took over. But the core mystery remained untouched. Then, in late 2019, a small, overlooked piece of evidence resurfaced. A partial fingerprint, lifted from the edge of Rachel's bedroom window. At the time, it had been too smudged for identification. But now, databases were larger. Algorithms more powerful. Matching techniques far more precise. The print was re-entered. And this time the system responded. A name flickered onto the screen. A man who had lived in the shadows of the case from the very beginning. A man no one had seriously suspected. A man whose connection to Rachel seemed, on the surface, almost non-existent. But beneath that thin surface lay a web of silence, fear, and carefully hidden truths. A long-hidden suspect, still living in Texas, still breathing free air, still walking among them, unaware that the past was finally catching up. And as detectives stared at that name, the room fell silent, heavy with the knowledge that a 20-year nightmare might finally be approaching its end. Because the cold case was no longer cold. It was awakening. And somewhere, a man who believed he had escaped justice was about to learn that time does not forgive. It only waits. The name glowed on the screen like a wound reopened. It was not a name the investigators expected. It was not a known predator, not a repeat offender, not a familiar shadow from the town's criminal underbelly. It belonged to someone who had never once appeared in the original suspect list. Someone whose life seemed ordinary, forgettable, safe. Daniel Hargrove, 39 years old, married, 2 children, employed as a night shift maintenance supervisor at a plastics manufacturing plant just outside the city. No violent criminal record, no restraining orders, no known connection to Rachel Miller. And yet, his fingerprint now sat in the center of her disappearance. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the computers filled the room. The low buzz of fluorescent lights pressed down on every nerve. A detective finally broke the silence, his voice barely louder than a whisper. Run him again. They did. The result did not change. The print lifted from Rachel's bedroom window in 2003 matched Daniel Hargrove with a statistical certainty so overwhelming it erased out the ridge patterns, the bifurcations, the microscopic scars. All identical. This was not coincidence. This was contact. And contact meant presence. Which meant that sometime on the night Rachel vanished, Daniel Hargrove had been at her window. The question was simple. Why? Detectives reopened the file. Every interview transcript. Every map. Every witness statement. They reconstructed the timeline from scratch, this time placing Daniel's name at the center of it. They learned that in 2003, Daniel had lived just 4 miles from Rachel's duplex. They learned that his night shifts placed him on the road at precisely the hours Rachel disappeared. They learned that his job required him to carry a master set of lockpicks, used to access restricted areas and maintenance panels across multiple buildings. And most chilling of all, they learned that Rachel's apartment complex was one of the sites his company serviced. His route included her street. His schedule placed him nearby. His fingerprint placed him at her window. The pieces slid into place with horrifying precision. But one problem remained. In 2003, Daniel Hargrove had been questioned. Briefly. Casually. And then dismissed. Back then, he had told police he'd never met Rachel. That he had never been to her apartment. That he had no idea who she was. And, because there was nothing to contradict him, they had moved on. Now, nearly 2 decades later, that lie resurfaced, heavy with consequence. The team moved quietly. They pulled Daniel's employment records, his vehicle history, his phone logs, his financial statements, every digital trace of his life since the night Rachel vanished. What they found was not a confession, but it was not innocence either. Daniel had changed cars 3 times in the year following Rachel's disappearance. He had abruptly transferred shifts, moving away from the district that included her apartment complex. He had taken sudden, unexplained leave just weeks after she vanished. And in his personal history, they uncovered something darker. 2 previous complaints, both from young women, both reported in neighboring counties, both dismissed. One woman claimed Daniel had followed her home from work, watching her apartment from across the street for days. Another described a man matching his description, lurking near her bedroom window late at night. Neither case produced enough evidence to justify charges. But together, they formed a pattern that now pointed directly at Rachel. The investigators knew they had to be careful. After 20 years, memory corrodes. Evidence degrades. Witnesses disappear. One misstep could collapse the entire case. So they began where the trail was freshest. Daniel's current life. He still lived in Texas, now in a quiet subdivision where manicured lawns and white fences painted a picture of stability. His neighbors described him as reserved, polite, invisible, a man who waved but rarely spoke, a father who coached his son's baseball team, a husband who mowed the lawn every Sunday morning. Nothing about him suggested a predator, which made the truth even more terrifying. Undercover officers initiated surveillance. They tracked his movements, his routines, his habits, every coffee stop, every grocery run, every late-night drive. He was meticulous, predictable, controlled, a man who thrived on order. And yet, late at night, when he believed no one was watching, he wandered. Long, aimless drives through dark neighborhoods, slow passes by apartment complexes, lingering pauses near isolated houses. Still hunting, still searching. One night, he parked across the street from a college dormitory and remained there for nearly 2 hours, engine idling, eyes fixed on the lit windows. That was when the investigators understood. Whatever he had done to Rachel in 2003 had not been an accident. It had been a ritual. They reopened Rachel's original case files, this time scrutinizing the smallest details with new eyes. The fingerprint on the window suddenly made sense. The lack of forced entry suggested familiarity with lock mechanisms. The absence of a struggle implied surprise. And the missing body suggested planning. Rachel had not been taken impulsively. She had been selected. But how? What connection existed between them that had escaped notice for so long? The answer lay buried in old maintenance logs. In the summer of 2003, Daniel's company had been contracted to repair HVAC units across Rachel's apartment complex. For 2 weeks, Daniel had personally supervised the work, which meant he had access to her building, her hallway, her door, her routine. He would have seen her come and go, observed her schedule, learned when she was alone, noticed when her lights went out. He would have known her habits long before she ever noticed him, if she noticed him at all. The thought chilled even the most hardened detectives. Rachel had been watched, studied, stalked. Every step she took, every late-night return from work, every quiet evening alone in her apartment had been part of a silent rehearsal. And on that August night, the rehearsal had ended. But still, one massive question remained. Where was Rachel? Without a body, the case remained fragile. Without physical proof of violence, prosecutors would hesitate. Without confession, doubt would linger. The investigators needed something more. They needed a crack. They found it in an old 911 call. 3 weeks after Rachel vanished, a woman in a neighboring town had reported a man attempting to break into her apartment through the bedroom window. She described a tall figure, broad-shouldered, wearing dark work clothes. When she screamed, he fled. At the time, patrol units arrived too late. The call was archived, forgotten. Until now, the description matched Daniel. The location sat directly along his former work route. The time of night matched Rachel's disappearance almost exactly. And suddenly, the silhouette of a predator emerged, moving through the darkness, testing doors, probing windows, searching for isolation. Rachel had not been the first target. She had been the one who vanished. Armed with this new understanding, detectives prepared to confront Daniel Hargrove. Not with accusations, not with threats, but with patience. They would let him speak. They would let silence work. They would let 20 years of buried memory rise to the surface. The interrogation room waited. A sterile chamber of pale walls and flickering lights, designed not for comfort, but for truth. Daniel arrived believing he was there to answer routine questions. He walked in calm, relaxed, unaware that his life was about to fracture. The door closed behind him with a soft click, a sound barely audible, yet heavy enough to echo across 2 decades. And as the recorder began to spin, the past leaned forward, ready to speak. The door closed with a muted click, sealing Daniel Hargrove inside the interrogation room. No dramatic slam. No raised voices. Just the soft finality of metal meeting metal. The room was cold, sterile, stripped of warmth. Pale walls. A scratched table bolted to the floor. 2 chairs positioned deliberately close, invading personal space without seeming aggressive. A single camera blinked red in the corner, silently recording every breath, every blink, every twitch of unease. Daniel sat down slowly. He folded his hands in front of him. He waited. Across the table, 2 detectives took their seats. They didn't rush. They didn't speak immediately. Silence, they knew, was a weapon. The longer it stretched, the more it unsettled. The more it forced a man to fill it with words. Daniel shifted slightly. He cleared his throat. Finally, one of the detectives spoke, his voice calm, measured, almost gentle. "Daniel, thank you for coming in. This won't take long. We just need to clear up a few things." Daniel nodded. A polite, cooperative smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Sure. Anything I can do to help." The word help lingered in the air. They began with small talk. His job. His kids. His neighborhood. The rhythm of his days. His routine. Familiar ground. Safe ground. Daniel answered smoothly, confidently. He described his life in neat, orderly sentences. There were no pauses. No stumbles. No visible cracks. Then, without warning, they shifted. "Do you remember a woman named Rachel Miller?" The name hit the room like a dropped glass. Daniel's eyes flickered. Just for a fraction of a second. A micro-expression so brief it could have been missed by anyone not trained to hunt such things. But they saw it. He recovered quickly. "No. Should I?" The detective leaned back slightly, folding his arms. "She lived in one of the apartment complexes your company serviced in 2003. Daniel blinked once. "I worked a lot of places. That was a long time ago." "Did you ever enter her unit?" "No." "Did you ever speak to her?" "No." "Did you ever stand outside her window?" The question hung, sharp and sudden. Daniel's jaw tightened. "No." The detective nodded slowly, as if satisfied. Then he slid a photograph across the table. A grainy image, black and white, the smudged outline of a fingerprint. This print was lifted from the edge of Rachel Miller's bedroom window. "It matches yours." The silence that followed was different. Heavier. Charged. Daniel stared at the photo. For a moment, the carefully constructed calm slipped. His breathing changed. Slightly faster. Slightly shallower. "I don't know how that got there," he said. "You're saying your fingerprint appeared on her window by accident?" "I serviced that building. I touched a lot of surfaces." "Not that unit." A pause. "Records show you were never assigned to her apartment specifically." Another pause. "Maybe I leaned on the window while working outside," Daniel said. "It was hot. We took breaks." "On the second floor?" The question landed. Daniel hesitated. A heartbeat. Then, "I don't remember." Memory failure. A classic refuge. The detectives let it rest. For now. They pivoted. They asked about his routes. His night shifts. His typical drives. They asked where he had been on the night of August 17th, 2003. "I was working," he said. "Like always." "Until what time?" 2 a.m. "And after that?" "I went home." "Did you stop anywhere?" "No." They showed him time cards. His shift had ended at 11:45 p.m. that night. Daniel studied the document, his expression tightening. "Maybe I misremembered." They showed him traffic footage. A vehicle matching his truck near Rachel Street at 10:48 p.m. "I drove through a lot of neighborhoods." They showed him maintenance logs. His presence at Rachel's complex 2 weeks before she vanished. "That was my job." Each answer was plausible. Each explanation thin. Together, they formed a fragile wall, riddled with cracks. The detectives pushed harder. They described the timeline of Rachel's disappearance. The open door. The untouched purse. The charged phone. The quiet house. Daniel listened in silence. His fingers flexed slightly. "Daniel," the lead detective said softly, "no one leaves their life behind voluntarily. Not like that." A long pause. I didn't hurt her, Daniel said. It was the first unsolicited denial. A subtle slip. No one said you did, the detective replied. Another pause. I mean, I didn't see her. I didn't talk to her. I didn't know her. They leaned forward. Then why are you nervous? I'm not. But his pulse betrayed him. A faint throb visible at his throat. A bead of sweat forming along his temple. They shifted strategies. They spoke of the families of missing women, of parents who waited decades for answers, of mothers who slept beside cold phones, of fathers who searched highways until their eyes blurred. They spoke of Rachel's mother, of the way she still set a place for her daughter at Thanksgiving, of the way she refused to move from the house where Rachel grew up, convinced that leaving might somehow erase her. Daniel swallowed. For the first time, something like emotion flickered across his face. Not remorse. Not sorrow. Something closer to discomfort. People deserve closure, the detective said quietly, even if the truth is ugly. Daniel stared at the table. Minutes passed. The clock ticked. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he spoke. I didn't mean for it to go that far. The words settled into the room like falling ash. Every muscle in the detective's bodies tightened. What didn't you mean? One asked. Daniel closed his eyes. For a moment, it seemed he might retreat, pull back behind the wall of denials. But then he exhaled. I just wanted to talk to her. Silence. You just wanted to talk to her, the detective repeated. I'd seen her. Around. She always looked tired. Sad. I thought maybe she needed someone. How long had you been watching her? Daniel's eyes opened. I don't know. Weeks. Maybe. Months. Another pause. Sometimes. The admission cracked something open. The words began to flow, hesitant at first, then faster, tumbling over each other as if they had been waiting years to escape. I noticed her schedule. When she came home. When she left. When her lights went off. I told myself it was nothing. Just curiosity. I didn't plan anything. But you went to her window, the detective said. I just wanted to see if she was okay. At 10:45 at night? Daniel rubbed his face. I knocked. She didn't answer. I thought maybe she was asleep. So, you looked inside her bedroom? I didn't mean to, but you did. Yes. The word dropped heavy. And what did you see? She was in the kitchen. I think. Moving around. So you went to the door. Daniel hesitated. Why, Daniel? Another long silence. Because I wanted her to notice me. The air in the room thickened. And when she opened the door, the detective asked. She didn't scream, Daniel said quickly. She was surprised, but she didn't scream. What happened next? I told her who I was. That I worked maintenance. That there was an issue with the AC unit in her building. She hesitated, but she let me inside. The confession unfurled slowly, carefully, like a blade being drawn inch by inch from its sheath. And then the detective pressed. Daniel's breathing grew ragged. I don't remember everything. That's not true. Daniel's jaw clenched. She realized something was wrong, he whispered. She tried to call someone. I panicked. And I grabbed her. Where? Her arm. Her wrist. Did she fight? Yes. The word came out raw. And then, I covered her mouth. Did you strike her? I didn't want to. But did you? A pause. Yes. The room went still. Once. Where? Her head. What did she do? She collapsed. And then, another pause. Longer. Heavier. I thought she was dead. The detectives held their breath. But she wasn't, Daniel continued. She was breathing. Barely. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. So you took her, the detective said. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes. Where? Silence. Daniel, the detective said, voice steady but urgent. We need to know where Rachel is. He shook his head. I can't. You can. I can't. Why? Because if I tell you, then it's real. The confession hung unfinished, suspended between past and present. And for the first time in 20 years, the silence surrounding Rachel Miller's disappearance began to break. But the darkest truth still waited ahead. The silence in the interrogation room thickened, pressing against every breath. Daniel Hargrove sat hunched forward, elbows on the table, hands locked together as if in prayer. His eyes were fixed on a single point in the scratched surface of the metal, unwilling to meet the gaze of the detectives who now waited, motionless, for the rest of the story. Outside the room, the building hummed with distant activity. Phones rang. Doors opened and closed. Footsteps echoed down sterile corridors. Life continued, indifferent to the moment unfolding in this small, sealed chamber. Inside, time had slowed to a crawl. Daniel, the lead detective, said quietly, "Start from the moment you left her apartment." A long breath. I carried her.
How?
Over my shoulder. She was light, too light. The words landed heavily. Was she conscious? I don't know. Her eyes were half open. She was making sounds. Not words. Just breathing. Where did you take her? To my truck. The detective nodded slowly, encouraging him to continue. I parked a block away, Daniel said. I didn't want to be seen. Was anyone around?
No.
The street was empty. How long did it take? Less than a minute. And then, I laid her across the back seat. I drove. Where? Daniel swallowed.
South.
Toward the industrial district. Why there? I knew the area. It was quiet at night. Lots of empty lots. Warehouses. No cameras. The detectives exchanged brief glances. Did she regain consciousness? Yes. The word cracked. When? About 10 minutes into the drive. She started coughing, gasping. What did she say? She kept asking where we were going. She begged me to take her home. The room felt colder. What did you do? I told her to be quiet. I said I'd let her go. Did you mean it? Daniel hesitated. I thought maybe. I didn't know. Everything was out of control. But you kept driving. Yes. Why? I was afraid. I knew I'd already crossed a line I couldn't come back from. The detective leaned forward slightly. Daniel, at any point, you could have stopped. I know. But you didn't.
No.
The words sounded small, hollow. They let the weight of it settle before continuing. Where did you stop? There's an abandoned gravel pit outside town, about 15 miles south. It used to be a construction site, but it shut down years earlier. No one goes there. How did you know about it? I worked nearby. We serviced a plant a few miles away. What happened when you arrived? Daniel closed his eyes. I parked behind a pile of rubble. I carried her out. Was she still alive? Yes. Was she speaking? Barely. She was crying. The room seemed to shrink. What did she say? She kept saying my name. The confession tightened every nerve. How did she know your name? I told her in the apartment. I thought it would calm her. And hearing her say it? It made everything worse. Why? Because it made her real. The words trembled. And then, I laid her down. I tried to think. I didn't know what to do. I walked away for a minute. I needed air. Did you leave her alone? For maybe 30 seconds. A minute. I don't know. When you came back? She was trying to stand. What did you do? I panicked. And I pushed her. Hard. Yes. She fell? Yes. Did she hit her head? Yes. Silence. Did she move?
No.
The detectives waited. She wasn't breathing. The words echoed in the small room, heavy with finality. Did you check her pulse? I didn't know how. What did you do? I stood there. For a long time. I thought if I waited, she might start breathing again. But she didn't.
No.
The room felt suffocating. So you left her, the detective said. Daniel shook his head.
No.
What did you do? I buried her. The words struck like thunder. Where? Near the pit, there was loose soil. I used a shovel from the truck. How deep? 3 feet. Maybe more. I don't remember. Did you mark the spot? No. Why not? I didn't want to be able to find it again. The detectives absorbed the confession in silence, the gravity of it pressing down on their chests. Did anyone see you? No. Did anyone know? No. Did you tell anyone? No. 20 years of questions collapsed into those few words. And then you went home, the detective said. Yes. And what did you do when you got there? I showered. I threw my clothes away. I tried to sleep. Did you? Daniel let out a bitter laugh. No. The detectives pressed on, guiding him back through the hours, minute by minute, detail by detail, locking the timeline into place, anchoring memory to fact. They asked about the shovel. He told them where he had discarded it. They asked about the truck. He described the cleaning, the chemicals, the scrubbing until his hands burned. They asked about the drive home. He described taking side roads, avoiding highways, circling aimlessly before finally pulling into his driveway just before dawn. They asked about the following days. I watched the news, he said. I waited for them to find her. But they didn't. No. And when they didn't, I told myself I'd gotten away with it. The detective's voice sharpened. And did that bring you peace? Daniel shook his head. No. It made it worse. Why? Because every day after that, I woke up knowing what I'd done. And yet, you went on living. Yes. You got married. Yes. You had children. Yes. And all the while, Rachel lay buried in the dirt. Daniel's shoulders slumped. Yes. The room fell silent again, the enormity of the truth sinking in. Outside, rain began to fall, streaking down the windows in thin, wavering lines. The detective stood. They thanked him for his cooperation. They told him he was under arrest. They led him out in handcuffs, past rows of desks, past startled officers, past a hallway that seemed suddenly too narrow, too bright. And as he was escorted toward the holding cells, word spread through the station like wildfire. The cold case had cracked. But for Rachel's family, the truth was only beginning to hurt. Because answers do not always bring peace. Sometimes they bring a deeper kind of grief. And somewhere in a forgotten stretch of Texas earth, a grave waited to be uncovered. The rain did not stop. It fell in thin, relentless sheets, soaking the empty roads, darkening the soil, blurring the edges of the world as convoy after convoy of police vehicles rolled south out of the city, headlights cutting pale tunnels through the storm. Daniel Hargrove sat in the back of one of them, wrists cuffed, eyes fixed on the passing darkness. For 20 years, he had avoided this road. Now, it led him straight back to the place he had tried to erase. The abandoned gravel pit lay beyond the industrial outskirts, past shuttered warehouses and rusted fences, in a forgotten stretch of land that barely appeared on updated maps. Over time, weeds had swallowed the dirt tracks. Brush had crept across the open ground. Nature had worked patiently, concealing what had been hidden beneath. When the vehicles finally stopped, the engines idled in low, uneasy murmurs. Floodlights were raised, piercing the night. The land emerged in stark detail, jagged mounds of gravel, broken concrete slabs, twisted rebar jutting from the earth like skeletal fingers. Puddles gathered in shallow depressions, reflecting distorted halos of white light. The air smelled of wet soil and rust. Daniel was led out, boots sinking slightly into the softened ground. For a moment, he hesitated. Then he raised his cuffed hands and pointed. There. The word barely rose above the hum of the generators. Search teams moved immediately. Yellow tape cut through the darkness, marking a wide perimeter. Forensic technicians stepped carefully across the unstable terrain, scanning the surface, noting subtle changes in soil texture, slight dips, unnatural contours. The earth had settled unevenly over 2 decades, but it had not forgotten. A shallow depression caught one technician's eye. Another noticed a faint difference in vegetation, grass growing thinner, weaker, as if the soil beneath could not fully support life. Ground-penetrating radar was deployed. Slow passes swept across the area, sending invisible waves deep into the earth. Then, on the monitor, an irregular shape appeared. A void. A disruption. Something buried where nothing should be. The command was given. They began to dig. Shovels cut into the wet soil. Mud clung to gloves. Each movement was slow, deliberate, reverent. This was no ordinary excavation. This was a recovery. The rain intensified, streaking down the workers' faces, washing streaks of clay across their jackets. No one stopped. Inch by inch, layer by layer, they descended. At 2 feet, nothing. At 3, a glint of pale fabric. The digging slowed. Hands replaced tools. The earth parted gently. And then, unmistakably, a human form emerged. Silence fell. Even the rain seemed to soften. A shallow grave. A body curled slightly on its side, knees bent, arms drawn inward, as if in a final instinctive attempt at protection. Time had stripped away color, softened features, but the outline remained heartbreakingly clear. Rachel Miller had been found. No one spoke. Some lowered their heads. Others turned away. A few stood frozen, unable to move. The forensic team moved in, documenting everything. Photographs, measurements, soil samples, positioning. Each detail carefully preserved, not for spectacle, but for truth. A fragment of fabric was lifted gently, the hem of a shirt once bright, now faded beyond recognition. Nearby, a delicate necklace lay tangled in strands of hair, its small pendant still intact, stubbornly clinging to identity. Rachel had not vanished. She had been taken. And now, finally, she had returned. Daniel watched from a distance, his face pale, eyes hollow. Whatever walls he had built inside himself over 2 decades had collapsed. His shoulders sagged under the unbearable gravity of reality. As the remains were carefully secured and placed into a transport vehicle, the night felt impossibly still. For investigators, the recovery marked a turning point. For Rachel's family, it would become the beginning of an entirely different nightmare. The call came just before dawn. Her mother answered on the second ring. She had slept lightly for 20 years. The detective's voice was calm, controlled, professional. But no training could soften the impact of the words. "We found her." On the other end of the line, silence. Then a sound, not quite a sob, not quite a scream, something raw, primal, torn directly from the chest. Her father took the phone, listening in stunned stillness, nodding though no one could see him. They had waited so long for this moment. And yet, nothing could prepare them for it. When they arrived at the medical examiner's office later that day, the building felt oppressively quiet. The sterile hallways, the harsh fluorescent lights, the faint scent of disinfectant, all of it clashed violently with the emotional storm rising inside them. They were led into a private room. On a table lay a sealed container. They did not open it. They did not need to. The presence alone confirmed everything their hearts already knew. Rachel was gone. Not missing. Not lost. Gone. The autopsy would reveal what time and soil had tried to conceal. Blunt force trauma to the head. Asphyxiation. Signs of a violent struggle. The official cause of death, homicide. But the details mattered less than the truth. She had fought. She had suffered. And she had died alone in the dark. The news exploded across Texas. Headlines blazed across screens and front pages. Texas 2003 cold case cracked. Long-hidden suspect finally arrested. Communities reeled. Reporters descended. Old neighbors were interviewed, voices trembling as they recalled the summer when fear crept into every unlocked door. Friends spoke of Rachel's laughter, her kindness, her dreams of becoming a counselor, helping others find their way through pain. And in living rooms across the state, people stared at her photograph, stunned by the realization that such horror could unfold so quietly, so close. Meanwhile, Daniel Hargrove sat alone in a holding cell, the walls closing in around him. For the first time since that August night, he could not outrun the truth. The grave had been opened, the silence shattered, and justice, delayed but relentless, had finally stepped into the light. Yet even as closure began to take shape, another question loomed, heavy and unresolved. Why had no one seen this coming? How had a man capable of such darkness lived unnoticed for so long? The answers would unravel slowly, revealing a chilling portrait of deception, denial, and the fragile illusion of safety. And for those who had known Rachel, the real journey through grief was only beginning. The town did not sleep that night. Lights burned in living rooms long after midnight. Televisions whispered the same breaking news on endless loops. Phones vibrated with messages that carried equal parts disbelief and fear. A single realization crept into every home, cold and unwelcome. The man who had taken Rachel Miller had lived among them, unseen, unquestioned, for nearly 2 decades. Daniel Hargrove was not a stranger. He was the neighbor who waved from across the street, the father who clapped from the sidelines at Little League games, the quiet man who fixed broken air conditioners and replaced burned-out lights. He was the background figure everyone overlooked. And now, his face stared out from every screen, his name etched permanently into the town's darkest memory. As reporters dug deeper, the carefully constructed image of Daniel's life began to fracture. Behind the neat lawns and polite nods lay a history of warning signs, fragments of truth scattered across years, ignored, dismissed, forgotten. The first crack emerged in police archives. In 1999, for years before Rachel disappeared, a woman named Emily Carter had reported a man stalking her near her apartment complex. She described someone who appeared repeatedly outside her bedroom window, sometimes standing motionless in the shadows, sometimes crouching low, watching. She said he knew her routine. She said he followed her. She said she was afraid. But the patrol officers who responded found no physical evidence, no witnesses, no clear suspect. The report was filed, closed, and buried beneath hundreds of others. Now, with Daniel's name in hand, investigators revisited Emily's case. Her description matched him perfectly. When detectives finally located her, she did not hesitate. "That's him," she whispered, staring at the photograph. "I never forgot that face." Her voice trembled. He didn't look angry. He didn't look violent. He just looked empty. Another report surfaced from 2001. A college student, Maria Alvarez, claimed a man had attempted to enter her apartment late at night, using what appeared to be professional tools. When confronted, he fled without a word. She remembered his eyes. Flat. Unblinking. At the time, no suspect had been identified. Now, surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed Daniel's truck idling in the lot minutes before the attempted break-in. He had been circling, testing, learning. Each incident had slipped through the cracks of a system designed to respond, not predict. Individually, the reports meant little. Together, they revealed a chilling pattern of escalation. A predator growing bolder, closer, more precise. And Rachel had been the moment he crossed the final threshold. As the investigation widened, detectives uncovered digital traces that painted an even darker picture. Hidden folders on Daniel's old hard drives, encrypted files, fragments of deleted internet searches, maps of neighborhoods, schedules, shift logs, notes scribbled in tiny handwriting, cataloging routines, parking patterns, building layouts. A meticulous hunter's journal. He had studied his surroundings with obsessive focus, blending into the environment while charting its vulnerabilities. And for 20 years, no one had noticed. His wife, Laura, learned the truth from a reporter knocking at her door. She stood frozen as cameras rolled, her face draining of color, her breath catching in her throat. "I don't understand," she kept repeating. "I don't understand." They had met in 2005, 2 years after Rachel vanished. Daniel had been gentle, soft-spoken, reliable, a man who fixed broken faucets and read bedtime stories. They built a life that appeared ordinary, unremarkable, safe. Their children adored him. He coached their teams, helped with homework, attended every recital, every parent-teacher conference. And now, Laura's memories splintered, each one replaying through a new lens of terror. Every late-night drive, every unexplained absence, every moment she had brushed aside as exhaustion or stress. All of it returned, twisted into something unrecognizable. "I lived with a stranger," she said quietly days later. "I just didn't know it." Psychologists pored over Daniel's background, searching for the roots of his violence. They found no history of childhood abuse, no documented trauma, no clear catalyst. What they found instead was emotional isolation. A boy who struggled to connect. A teenager who drifted at the edges of social groups. A man who learned early how to mimic normality without ever fully inhabiting it. He was not driven by rage. He was driven by control. The need to observe, to possess, to feel power over another human being. Rachel had represented vulnerability, routine, predictability. And to Daniel, that predictability had become irresistible. In interviews, neighbors described how he rarely invited anyone inside his home, how he preferred solitude, how he spent long hours in the garage late at night. Some recalled seeing his truck parked in unfamiliar places at odd hours. They had noticed. They simply hadn't connected the dots. Guilt settled heavily across the community. People questioned themselves. Could we have seen this? Should we have said something? Did we miss the signs? The truth, as always, was cruel in its simplicity. Evil rarely announces itself. It blends. It adapts. It survives by appearing ordinary. As prosecutors prepared their case, they faced the immense challenge of transforming confession into conviction. Daniel had admitted to taking Rachel, admitted to burying her. But memory alone, especially after 2 decades, would not suffice. They needed physical proof. And the earth had begun to provide it. Soil samples from the grave matched residue found in the seams of Daniel's old work boots, preserved in storage after his arrest. Microscopic fibers recovered from Rachel's clothing matched the upholstery of his 2003 truck. Trace elements of industrial lubricant, the same brand used exclusively by his company, were detected on fragments of fabric recovered from the burial site. Each finding tightened the noose. Each result erased doubt. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in solitary confinement, stripped of routine, stripped of control, stripped of the careful order he had built around himself. In the sterile confines of his cell, the weight of memory pressed relentlessly inward. Interrogators returned, not for information, but for understanding. Why Rachel? Why that night? Why not stop? At first, Daniel offered nothing. Then, slowly, words returned. "I didn't think of her as a person," he said quietly. "Not at first. She was just part of the landscape." "And when did that change?" a detective asked. "When she looked at me." "How?" "Like I mattered." The confession unsettled even the most seasoned investigators. "In that moment," Daniel continued, "I felt seen, and I couldn't let it go." His voice cracked. Then it all fell apart. The town watched as court dates were set, motions filed, evidence disclosed. Each new revelation reopened wounds. Each headline revived old nightmares. Yet beneath the horror, something else began to take shape. Relief. Not peace. Not closure. But the fragile comfort of certainty. Rachel Miller had not vanished into nothing. She had been taken. And now, the man responsible would finally face judgment. But for her family, the knowledge brought little solace. Because justice cannot restore stolen time. It cannot rewind a life. It cannot unbury memories. And in quiet moments, when the cameras were gone and the house lay still, her parents sat with the echo of a daughter's laughter that would never return. 20 years of hope had ended in grief. Yet grief, at least, had an ending. Uncertainty did not. And as the trial approached, one final storm gathered on the horizon. A storm that would force the entire community to confront not only what had happened but what it meant to live beside it, unaware for so long. The courthouse filled before dawn. Long lines formed beneath a sky still bruised with night, people standing shoulder to shoulder in tense silence, drawn together by the same dark gravity. Some came for justice, some for closure, some simply to understand how a horror so vast could hide in plain sight for so long. By the time the doors opened, reporters already crowded the steps, microphones raised, cameras blinking, voices hushed but urgent. The name Daniel Hargrove hung in the air like a storm cloud. Inside, the courtroom felt too small for the weight it was about to carry. Wooden benches creaked under the strain of bodies. The walls seemed to press inward. Every seat was filled, every aisle lined, every breath held tight. At precisely 9 a.m., the doors at the side of the room opened. Daniel Hargrove stepped inside. He wore a plain jumpsuit. His wrists were cuffed. His shoulders sloped slightly forward, as if already bearing the burden of judgment. Gone was the clean-cut maintenance supervisor, the suburban father, the man who blended so effortlessly into the background. In his place stood a figure stripped of disguise, exposed beneath the harsh lights of public scrutiny. For a moment, his eyes scanned the room. Then they stopped. Rachel's parents sat in the front row. Her mother's hands trembled in her lap. Her father's jaw was set, rigid, as if carved from stone. Their faces bore the quiet devastation of 20 years spent waiting for a daughter who would never come home. Daniel looked away. The judge entered. The gavel struck. And with that single, sharp sound, the past surged forward, flooding the present. The prosecution began with a simple statement. This case is about a young woman who trusted the world, and a man who used that trust to destroy her. They spoke of Rachel Miller, of her childhood dreams, her devotion to her studies, her weekend shifts at the diner, her plans to become a counselor. They described the ordinary evening that ended in extraordinary violence. They described the open door, the silent house, the unanswered phone. Then they described the years, the endless searching, the unanswered questions, the hollow space left behind. And finally, they described the confession, the abandoned gravel pit, the shallow grave, the moment when 20 years of silence collapsed. The courtroom sat frozen. Then the defense rose. They did not deny that Rachel was dead. They did not deny that Daniel had been involved. Instead, they painted a portrait of a man unraveling, a man overwhelmed, a man who panicked, a man whose intentions, they argued, were never murderous. It was a tragic chain of mistakes, the defense attorney said, not a calculated act of evil. The words rippled through the room, stirring murmurs of disbelief. The prosecution responded with evidence. They called the first witness, a forensic analyst. She described the fingerprint on the window, the match, the impossibility of coincidence. She described the fibers, the soil, the industrial lubricant. Each detail chipped away at the fragile scaffolding of the defense. Then came the surveillance footage. Grainy images of a truck idling in shadowed streets. Time stamps flickering in the corner. A slow pass. A pause. Another slow pass. Predatory. Deliberate. Then came the witnesses. Emily Carter took the stand, her voice trembling as she described the man who had stalked her years earlier. The way he stood outside her window. The way his eyes never blinked. When she pointed to Daniel, the room seemed to hold its breath. Maria Alvarez followed, recounting the night someone tried to force his way into her apartment. The metallic scrape of tools. The sudden silence when she screamed. More faces. More voices. Each adding weight. Each tightening the narrative. Until the pattern became impossible to ignore. This was not a single moment of madness. This was escalation. Then, at last, they called the most devastating witness. Rachel's mother. She walked slowly to the stand, each step deliberate, measured, as if afraid that moving too quickly might shatter what little composure she had left. Her voice was soft, but it did not waver. She spoke of Rachel's laughter, of the way she used to sing along to the radio while doing dishes, of her habit of calling home late at night just to say she loved them. She spoke of the morning she realized her daughter was missing, of the years that followed, of the empty bedroom preserved like a shrine, of birthdays celebrated with a silent place at the table. And then she turned to Daniel. Her eyes met his. And for a moment, the courtroom disappeared. "There is not a single day," she said, "when I do not imagine her walking back through our door." Her voice cracked. "And every night, I dream of the moment I wake up and this has all been a mistake." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "It never is." The silence that followed felt sacred. Even the judge lowered his eyes. When the prosecution rested, the defense called their experts. Psychologists spoke of dissociation, of impaired judgment, of emotional detachment. They argued that Daniel had never intended to kill, that fear, not malice, had guided his actions. But intent mattered little in the face of outcome, and outcome lay buried in the earth for 20 years. The final blow came when Daniel himself took the stand. The courtroom leaned forward as he swore the oath, his voice barely audible. He spoke haltingly, of loneliness, of feeling invisible, of the night everything went wrong. He admitted to deception, to panic, to failure. But when pressed, he refused to use the word murder. "I didn't plan to kill her," he said. The prosecutor's voice cut sharply through the room. "But you planned to take her." Daniel hesitated. "Yes." "And you planned to lie." "Yes." "And you planned to hide her body." "Yes." "So the only thing you didn't plan," the prosecutor said quietly, "was for her to die." Daniel lowered his head. "Yes." The courtroom absorbed the truth in stunned silence. In closing arguments, the prosecution spoke of accountability, of the difference between accident and choice, of the moment when every human being stands at a crossroads. They described how Daniel had chosen, again, and again, and again, until there was no path left but destruction. The defense pleaded for mercy, for understanding, for recognition of regret. But regret could not rewrite history, and it could not return a daughter to her parents. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. When they returned, the air felt electrified. Every heartbeat echoed. The foreperson stood. The verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. A collective breath surged through the room. Rachel's mother sobbed. Her father closed his eyes, tears streaking silently down his face. Daniel remained still, his expression hollow, as if the words had drained what little remained inside him. The judge scheduled sentencing. And for the first time in 20 years, the long shadow of uncertainty began to lift. But the story was not yet finished. Because justice, even when served, carries a weight all its own. And the final chapter would leave no one untouched. The courtroom was silent as the judge entered. Not the ordinary hush of legal formality, but a heavy, suspended quiet, thick with expectation and dread. Every breath seemed too loud. Every movement felt intrusive. The air itself appeared to hold its tension, bracing for the moment that would decide the final shape of a 20-year nightmare. Daniel Hargrove stood at the defense table, hands clasped tightly in front of him. His face had aged rapidly in the weeks since his arrest. Sleepless nights had etched deep lines into his skin. His eyes, once carefully blank, now flickered with exhaustion and fear. Across the aisle, Rachel Miller's parents sat together, their shoulders nearly touching. They did not speak. They did not look at Daniel. Their focus remained fixed on the empty space ahead, as if confronting him directly might tear open wounds already stretched to their limit. The judge adjusted his glasses. "We are here to impose sentence." The words fell with quiet finality. The prosecution rose first, urging the court to recognize the magnitude of the crime, the years of suffering, the deliberate deception, the calculated concealment. They spoke of deterrence, of accountability, of a life stolen and a family shattered. They asked for the maximum sentence allowed by law. The defense followed, pleading for leniency. They described Daniel's cooperation, his confession, his lack of prior violent convictions. They spoke of his children, now forced to grow up with the knowledge of their father's crime. They asked the court to consider mercy. The judge listened in silence. Then he turned to Rachel's family. "You may speak." Her father rose slowly. The room seemed to lean toward him. "I've spent 20 years imagining what I would say to the man who took my daughter," he began, his voice steady but low. "I used to think I would scream, that I would curse him, that I would demand he suffer." He paused. "But standing here now, I realize something else. Nothing I say can undo what he did. Nothing can bring her back." His eyes glistened. "So, I will not waste my words on hatred. I will spend them on Rachel." He spoke of her curiosity, her stubborn kindness, her habit of rescuing injured animals and nursing them back to health. He described the way she laughed too loudly at bad jokes, the way she called him whenever she changed a tire, even after he taught her how. She trusted the world, he said, and the world betrayed her. Then her mother stood. Her hands shook as she clutched a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this letter a long time ago," she said softly. "I thought I might give it to her one day. I never got the chance." She unfolded the page, her voice trembling as she read words meant for a daughter who would never hear them. She spoke of pride, of love, of gratitude for the brief time they had shared, of the unbearable ache of loss. And finally, she turned to Daniel. "I will never forgive you," she said, "but I will not let you define the rest of my life." Tears streamed down her face. "My daughter deserves more than that." She sat. The courtroom exhaled as one. Daniel was given the opportunity to speak. He stood slowly, eyes fixed on the floor. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I don't deserve it." His voice wavered. "I think about Rachel every day. I see her face when I close my eyes. I hear her voice in my dreams." He swallowed. "I can't undo what I did. I can only live with it." Silence followed. Then the judge spoke. "Daniel Hargrove," he said, "your actions reflect not a single moment of panic, but a series of deliberate choices. You violated the trust of your profession. You exploited a young woman's vulnerability. You concealed her fate for 2 decades." His voice hardened. "You stole not only a life, but years of peace from an entire family." He paused. "For these reasons, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The words struck with absolute clarity. No ambiguity. No escape. A murmur rippled through the room. Rachel's parents closed their eyes. Daniel's shoulders slumped, the finality settling into his bones. He was led away in silence. No outburst. No resistance. Only the slow, heavy shuffle of footsteps down a corridor that led away from everything he had once known. Outside, the crowd waited. When the verdict was announced, a wave of emotion swept through the gathered families, reporters, and strangers who had followed the case for years. Some wept. Some embraced. Others stood motionless, absorbing the weight of an ending that did not feel like one. Rachel's family stepped into the sunlight, blinking against its brightness. For a moment, they stood there, uncertain. Then her mother lifted her face to the sky and whispered her daughter's name. In the days that followed, the town slowly returned to its routines. Stores reopened. Children went back to school. Traffic resumed its familiar rhythm. But beneath the surface, something fundamental had shifted. People locked their doors more carefully. They watched their surroundings more closely. They spoke more often about trust, about awareness, about the thin lines separating safety from catastrophe. Memorials appeared near Rachel's old apartment. Flowers, photographs, handwritten notes. Strangers left messages promising they would remember her. And somewhere in a maximum security prison, Daniel Hargrove began the long, quiet descent into a life defined by isolation. Days blurred together. Nights stretched endlessly. The silence that once protected him now imprisoned him. There were no shadows to hide in. No routines to stalk. No windows to peer through. Only the echo of memory. Yet even as one story reached its judicial conclusion, its emotional resonance continued to spread outward, touching lives far beyond the courtroom. Rachel's case became a catalyst. Cold cases across Texas were reopened. Old evidence was retested. Forgotten leads re-examined. Families who had waited decades dared to hope again. Because her story proved something essential. That time does not erase truth. It only buries it. And sometimes buried things rise. Yet for Rachel's parents, no broader impact could replace the singular absence at the center of their lives. Her room remained untouched. Her photographs lined the hallway. Her laughter lingered in the quiet spaces between memories. Justice had been served. But peace remained elusive. And in the stillness of early mornings, when the world felt suspended between sleep and waking, her mother still reached instinctively for a phone that no longer rang. Because closure is not an ending. It is a fragile truce between grief and acceptance. One that must be renegotiated every day. And as the town exhaled, believing the nightmare finally over, one last truth remained. Some stories do not end. They fade. They echo. They linger in the corners of memory, waiting to remind us how thin the walls of certainty truly are. The headlines faded. The cameras moved on. The courthouse steps emptied. Yet the story did not leave. It lingered in the spaces between conversations, in the quiet pauses at dinner tables, in the uneasy glances exchanged between neighbors who had once believed they lived in a safe and predictable world. Rachel Miller's case did not end with a verdict. It became a ripple. And that ripple spread outward, touching lives far beyond the boundaries of a single town. Across Texas, detectives reopened dusty cabinets, their metal drawers groaning under the weight of forgotten files. Evidence bags sealed decades earlier were lifted back into the light. Old witness statements, once dismissed as unreliable or incomplete, were read again, now sharpened by the knowledge that time could hide truth, but not erase it. DNA labs saw a surge of samples. Cold cases that had slept undisturbed for years stirred. And in police departments across the state, a single question began to echo. What else have we missed? For families long trapped in the limbo of unanswered loss, Rachel's story became a fragile beacon. Some allowed themselves to hope for the first time in decades. Others braced for disappointment, having learned too well the cost of expectation. Yet the possibility alone was enough to change everything. Because if one buried truth could surface after 20 years, then perhaps theirs could too. In small towns and sprawling cities alike, detectives returned to scenes once thought exhausted. They retraced steps, re-interviewed witnesses, reconstructed timelines with tools that had not existed when the crimes first occurred. And slowly, quietly, more stories began to unfold. A missing woman from 1994, identified through DNA genealogy. A teenager vanished in 1988, finally traced to a long-incarcerated offender. A nameless skeleton discovered in a drainage ditch, restored to identity after 3 decades. Each breakthrough carried echoes of Rachel's case. Each one whispered the same message. The past is not silent. It is only waiting. For Rachel's parents, these developments brought complicated emotions. Pride that their daughter's story had sparked a movement. Gratitude that other families might be spared their long uncertainty. But also a renewed ache. Because each solved case reminded them of the years they had lost. Years that could not be returned. Years in which Rachel should have lived. They began speaking publicly, attending conferences, meeting with families of the missing, lending their voices to a cause forged in grief. Her mother spoke gently, but firmly. Hope is painful, she said, but it is also necessary. Without it, we disappear too. Her father added, we can't change what happened to Rachel, but we can fight to make sure no one else waits as long as we did. Their words traveled far, and slowly, the silence surrounding countless cold cases began to crack. Yet even as the wider world stirred, the town itself remained changed in quieter, subtler ways. Children were escorted more carefully. Doors locked earlier. Strangers noticed. Trust, once freely given, now required verification. The memory of Daniel Hargrove lingered like a shadow cast at the edge of every familiar face. Because the most terrifying lesson of all had not been his cruelty. It had been his normality. The realization that evil could exist so seamlessly within the everyday reshaped how people saw one another. Conversations became cautious. Observations sharpened. The invisible line between neighbor and stranger blurred. Yet within that heightened awareness, a strange resilience emerged. Community meetings filled local halls. Neighborhood watch groups formed. People began talking more, looking out for one another, sharing small concerns before they became silent fears. The tragedy had fractured their sense of safety, but it also rebuilt it in a new form, one rooted not in illusion, but in vigilance. Meanwhile, inside the prison walls, Daniel Hargrove's world contracted to a narrow routine. Metal doors, concrete corridors, fluorescent lights. His days unfolded in rigid monotony, stripped of choice, stripped of autonomy, stripped of secrecy. At night, when the cell block settled into uneasy stillness, memories surged forward. Rachel's voice, her eyes, the sound of her breathing, the weight of her body, the silence after. There was no escape, no distraction, no way to outrun the past. Time, once his shield, now became his punishment. Years stretched endlessly ahead, each one identical, each one heavy with regret that could no longer hide behind routine. And yet, even in confinement, his story continued to reverberate beyond him, reshaping policies, protocols, and perceptions. Law enforcement agencies revised procedures for missing person cases. Early warning patterns were analyzed. Cross-county communication systems were strengthened. The small signs once dismissed as coincidence were now treated with new seriousness. Rachel's absence became a catalyst for presence, a reminder that attention, even to the smallest detail, could alter fate. For her friends, life unfolded in fragments of memory. They married, had children, built careers. Yet in quiet moments, they still pictured Rachel beside them, aging, changing, laughing in ways they could only imagine. They spoke of her in the present tense. She would love this. She would have hated that. She would have been so proud. Her life, unfinished, became a series of imagined possibilities. And sometimes, late at night, they dreamed of a world where she had never vanished, where the open door had been closed, the window untouched, the night uneventful. In those dreams, she was still alive, still waiting tables, still studying, still calling home. Waking from those dreams was the hardest part, because reality always returned, relentless, unforgiving. Yet amid the grief, something enduring took shape. A legacy, not defined by how Rachel died, but by how her story awakened others. Her name appeared on advocacy banners, on scholarship funds, on memorial plaques, on cold case initiatives. Each inscription carrying the quiet promise that she would not be forgotten. And in the long arc of time, her absence began to shape a presence larger than her life had ever been. But even legacy could not silence the deeper question that lingered beneath every reflection. What does it mean to truly know another human being? How many secrets hide behind familiar smiles? How many shadows exist beneath ordinary lives? Rachel's story offered no comforting answers, only a reminder that certainty is fragile, that safety is conditional, that the line between normal and monstrous is thinner than we wish to believe. And as the seasons turned and years began to layer upon one another once more, the final truth settled quietly into the collective consciousness. Some crimes end in courtrooms, others end in memory, and the most haunting of all never truly end at all. They remain, waiting, echoing, just beyond the edge of silence. The arrest did not end the story. It only tore it open wider. In the days that followed, the small Texas town became a place of constant motion, a blur of flashing lights and crowded sidewalks. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, satellite trucks lining the streets like silent sentinels, microphones thrust toward anyone willing to speak. Every conversation circled back to the same question, whispered in grocery aisles, murmured in church pews, spoken aloud in trembling voices over late-night phone calls. How could this have been hidden for so long? The suspect sat in a narrow holding cell, his face now a familiar image splashed across screens and front pages. But familiarity brought no comfort. The more people learned about his daily routines, the more unsettling it became. He had lived an ordinary life. He had gone to work, paid bills, attended family gatherings. He had laughed at jokes, shaken hands, waved at neighbors. For years, he had moved through the town like a ghost wearing human skin, carrying inside him a secret heavy enough to crush the air around it. Investigators worked without pause, racing against time, chasing every possible connection, every overlooked detail. They re-interviewed witnesses, re-examined evidence, replayed recordings until the words blurred together. Old notebooks were pulled from dusty storage boxes, their pages yellowed, corners bent, filled with names and numbers written by hands that had long since retired or passed away. Each line was a fragment of the past, a breadcrumb leading deeper into the labyrinth of a case that refused to die. They retraced the suspect's movements from the months surrounding the crime, mapping his life hour by hour, day by day. Bank statements, phone records, work schedules, gas station receipts, all of it assembled into a timeline as fragile and complex as glass. And slowly, painfully, the shape of a hidden narrative began to emerge, one that suggested preparation, calculation, and an eerie patience. Witnesses came forward, some after decades of silence. They spoke of odd behavior, unexplained absences, strange comments dismissed at the time as harmless. One recalled seeing him near the scene late at night, his truck idling in the darkness. Another remembered a cryptic remark about things that never truly go away. Each memory landed like a dropped stone, sending ripples through a case already heavy with implication. For the victim's family, the arrest reopened wounds that had never healed. They were thrust back into the public eye, their private grief once again laid bare. Interviews became a blur of cameras and condolences, each question a blade, each answer a reminder of what had been stolen. They spoke of a life interrupted, of birthdays never celebrated, of empty chairs at holiday tables. Their voices trembled, not only with sorrow, but with a fierce determination to see the truth finally laid bare. The town, too, struggled under the weight of revelation. Familiar streets felt different, their shadows darker, their corners more ominous. The places where children once played now carried an undercurrent of unease. Trust, once assumed, had become fragile. Every friendly wave now carried a trace of doubt. As the investigation deepened, new questions emerged. Was the suspect acting alone? Had anyone else known? Could someone, somewhere, have spoken up sooner? The possibility of unseen accomplices lingered like a cold breath on the back of the neck. Detectives followed every lead, no matter how faint, aware that the truth often hid in the smallest details. Behind closed doors, they confronted the suspect, their questions precise, relentless. He listened in silence, his expression unreadable, eyes fixed on a point beyond the walls. When he spoke, his words were measured, carefully chosen, offering fragments, but never the full picture. He admitted to nothing, denied everything, leaving investigators to piece together the narrative from evidence alone. Forensic teams returned to the original scene, now transformed by time. Grass had grown, buildings had been renovated, landscapes reshaped by years of weather and neglect. Yet beneath the surface, traces remained. Soil samples, fragments of material, microscopic fibers, each held the potential to bridge the gap between past and present. Every discovery felt like unearthing a buried echo, a whisper from a moment frozen in fear. Late nights became routine. The police station glowed long after midnight, its windows a grid of light against the darkness. Inside, detectives hunched over desks, coffee cups stacked like miniature towers, eyes burning from exhaustion. The case consumed them, pulling them into its orbit, refusing to release its grip. And beyond the walls of the station, the community waited. They waited for clarity, for explanation, for justice. But what arrived instead was a deeper sense of unease, an understanding that the truth, when it finally emerged, might not bring peace. It might only confirm the depth of the betrayal, the extent of the loss. Rumors spread, fueled by speculation and fear. Online forums buzzed with theories, some plausible, others wildly conspiratorial. Every detail was dissected, every photograph scrutinized. The line between fact and fiction blurred, leaving behind a fog of half-truths and assumptions. In quiet moments, residents reflected on their own memories, searching for signs they might have missed. A strange look, a delayed response, a casual remark that now felt charged with sinister meaning. Regret seeped into these recollections, a sense that perhaps the truth had been visible all along, hidden in plain sight. The suspect's family faced a different torment. Their lives were suddenly split into before and after, their identity forever linked to a name now synonymous with horror. They withdrew from public view, curtains drawn, doors locked, bracing themselves against the onslaught of judgment. They, too, wrestled with disbelief, struggling to reconcile the person they had known with the monster described in headlines. As the legal process began, the case entered a new phase, one governed by procedure and precedent. Motions were filed, hearings scheduled, evidence cataloged with painstaking care. Each step felt agonizingly slow, yet the gravity of the stakes demanded precision. One misstep, one overlooked detail, could unravel everything. In court documents, the narrative took on a stark, clinical tone. Dates, times, locations, actions. The language stripped of emotion, yet heavy with implication. But beneath that formality pulsed the raw human story, a life lost, a family shattered, a community forever changed. Night after night, the town lay restless. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams that replayed the tragedy in endless variations. The past had resurfaced, and it refused to be silenced. Even as investigators closed in on what they believed to be the full truth, they understood that some questions might never be answered. Motives could remain obscure. Certain moments might be lost to time. But the pursuit itself had become a form of reckoning, a declaration that no crime, no matter how old, would be allowed to fade into oblivion. And so, the cold case that once lay dormant, buried beneath years of neglect and fading memory, now stood at the center of a storm of revelation, of grief, of relentless inquiry. Its echoes traveled far beyond the borders of a single town, serving as a reminder that the past is never truly past. It waits, it watches, and when it returns, it demands to be heard. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt unnatural, as if even the air itself were holding its breath. Rows of wooden benches creaked softly as people shifted, trying to find comfort where none existed. Faces were tight, eyes fixed forward, waiting. Years of uncertainty, grief, and unanswered questions had led to this single moment, and yet, instead of closure, what filled the room was a thick, suffocating tension, the awareness that no verdict could ever restore what had been taken. The suspect sat motionless behind the defense table, hands folded, gaze lowered. His presence seemed to drain warmth from the room. Every movement he made drew attention, every blink analyzed, every breath interpreted. Across the aisle, the victim's family clung to one another, bound by shared pain, their expressions etched with exhaustion and resolve. They had waited more than 2 decades for this, carrying grief like a permanent shadow, learning to live with absence, learning to survive without answers. The prosecution laid out the story piece by piece, constructing a timeline that stretched back into the past, threading together fragments that once seemed meaningless. A receipt, a witness statement, a fiber trapped in decaying fabric, a trace of DNA preserved through years of technological progress. Each element alone was fragile, uncertain, but together they formed a mosaic that pointed inexorably toward one conclusion. The narrative unfolded slowly, deliberately, forcing the room to relive the final hours of a life cut short, to walk once more through the darkness of that night, to hear the echoes of fear and confusion that still seemed to linger in the corners of the walls. As the evidence accumulated, the weight of it pressed down on everyone present. Some spectators stared, unblinking, as though afraid to miss a single detail. Others lowered their eyes, unable to endure the relentless reconstruction of suffering. Every revelation peeled back another layer of denial, exposing the raw core of the crime. Yet even now, with the story laid bare, uncertainty hovered at the edges. Motive remained elusive, buried beneath years of silence. The question of why lingered, unanswered, a void that logic could not fill. The defense seized upon these gaps, arguing doubt, raising the specter of coincidence, of mistaken interpretation, of memory distorted by time. They spoke of alternative possibilities, of investigative missteps, of the dangers of reopening wounds long since scarred over. But the scars themselves told their own story. They testified to endurance, to a community's refusal to forget. They spoke of a collective determination that had carried the case forward through decades of stagnation and frustration. And in that persistence, there was a quiet power, a reminder that even the coldest case still holds a pulse, faint but relentless. When the final arguments ended, the jury withdrew, leaving behind a silence that rang louder than any voice. Minutes stretched into hours. Outside, the sky darkened, clouds rolling slowly overhead, mirroring the uncertainty below. Families waited. Reporters whispered. Detectives paced the corridors, replaying every decision, every assumption, every overlooked possibility. The building itself seemed to hold the tension in its walls. And then, at last, the jury returned. No matter the outcome, the moment carried a gravity that transcended law and procedure. It was the culmination of years of searching, of hoping, of refusing to let the truth vanish. As the verdict was read, breaths caught, hearts pounded, and for a fleeting instant, time seemed to freeze. But justice, even when delivered, is never simple. It does not erase memory. It does not mend what has been broken. It offers no guarantee of peace. For some, it brought a measure of relief, a fragile sense that the world had shifted, if only slightly, toward balance. For others, it reopened wounds, forcing them to confront the permanence of loss. Outside the courthouse, the town gathered once more, drawn together by shared history and collective trauma. Conversations were hushed, thoughtful. There was no celebration, no triumph, only a sober recognition of what had been endured. Candles flickered in the growing darkness, small flames pushing back against the night, symbols of remembrance, of resilience, of lives forever intertwined by a single, devastating event. Yet even as the case closed in the eyes of the law, its presence lingered. It lived on in quiet streets, in half-forgotten memories, in the cautious way neighbors now looked at one another. It became a story told in fragments, a warning passed down through generations, a reminder that danger does not always announce itself, that monsters do not always wear faces we expect. The house where it began still stood, altered by time, its walls bearing silent witness. The road where critical moments unfolded still curved through the landscape, indifferent to the weight it carried. Life continued, as it always does, relentless in its forward motion, yet forever shaped by the shadows of the past. And somewhere within those shadows, the unanswered questions remained. Not every secret had been uncovered. Not every truth had been spoken. The cold case, though resolved on paper, retained its chill, a lingering echo that refused to fade completely. Because some stories do not end. They settle into the fabric of a place, becoming part of its identity, its cautionary tale, its collective memory. They remind us that time does not heal all wounds. Some simply scar over, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the slightest pressure to bring them back into the light. In the end, what remained was not closure, but awareness. An understanding that vigilance matters, that persistence matters, That even in the darkest corners, truth can survive, patient and unyielding, waiting for the moment when it can finally rise. And as the lights dimmed, as the crowds dispersed, as the echoes of the trial faded into the night, the story of the Texas 2003 cold case lingered, suspended between past and present, a haunting testament to loss, to endurance, and to the relentless human need to know. The night after the verdict, the town did not sleep. Porch lights burned until dawn. Curtains stayed open. Televisions murmured in empty living rooms, replaying the same footage again and again, as if repetition might finally make the truth feel real. But reality remained distant, unreal, a heavy presence that settled over every street and every home. The case was officially closed, yet its gravity refused to loosen its grip, and in the silence that followed the courtroom's final echo, a new chapter began, one defined not by investigation, but by memory. In the days that followed, people returned to routines that now felt strangely artificial. Coffee shops reopened. School buses rumbled down familiar roads. Office lights flickered on at dawn. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Laughter ended too quickly. The ordinary rhythm of life struggled to regain its tempo, constantly disrupted by the lingering awareness of what had unfolded. Every familiar face carried an unspoken question: how well do we really know each other? For the victim's family, time moved differently. Their days were measured not by hours, but by waves of emotion. Relief arrived in brief, fragile moments, quickly overtaken by exhaustion and grief. Justice had spoken, but justice did not fill the empty space at the dinner table. It did not bring back birthdays, graduations, late-night conversations, or the simple comfort of presence. What it offered was acknowledgement, a public recognition of loss, a formal declaration that the pain they had carried for so long had not been invisible. They returned to the places that once held joy, now layered with sorrow. Childhood bedrooms stood frozen in time, dust softening the edges of forgotten dreams. Old photographs were taken from drawers and boxes, their colors faded, their smiles unchanging. In those still images, life existed as it once was, untouched, whole, full of possibility. Each photograph became a reminder not only of what was lost, but of what had once been, a fragile bridge to a past that could never be restored. Detectives, too, struggled to step away. For years, the case had defined their professional lives, shaping their instincts, sharpening their resolve. It had taught them patience, humility, and the cruel reality of unanswered questions. Now, with its conclusion, a strange emptiness settled in. Some found themselves returning to the old files, flipping through pages they no longer needed, tracing the journey that had consumed so much of their time. Others stood quietly at the edge of the former crime scene, listening to the wind move through the trees, as if hoping to hear one last whisper of truth. The town erected a small memorial, modest in design, powerful in meaning. A simple plaque, a few carefully chosen words, a space for flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. It became a place of reflection, a silent gathering point where strangers stood side by side, united by shared memory. Children asked their parents why the candles were there. Parents struggled for answers, searching for language that could explain loss without passing on fear. In those conversations, the legacy of the case began to take shape, transforming from tragedy into caution, from horror into awareness. As weeks turned into months, the headlines faded. News crews packed up their equipment. Satellite trucks disappeared from the streets. The world's attention shifted elsewhere, to new stories, new crises, new shocks. But for those who lived in the shadow of the case, the story never truly left. It settled into daily life, woven into the way doors were locked at night, into the way children were watched a little more closely, into the way strangers were greeted with polite restraint instead of open trust. Yet alongside the fear, something else grew, an unspoken bond. Neighbors checked in on one another more often. Community gatherings became spaces not only of remembrance, but of resilience. In shared grief, there emerged a quiet strength, a collective determination to protect what remained, to value connection, to refuse indifference. Out of tragedy, a fragile solidarity took root. The suspect disappeared into the system, his days now defined by concrete walls and regimented schedules. His name faded from conversation, replaced by a deliberate avoidance, as though speaking it might summon unwanted echoes. But the consequences of his actions lingered far beyond his confinement, rippling outward, shaping lives he would never see, futures he could never touch. Years from now, new families would move into the town, unaware of its history. Children would play in the same streets, their laughter rising into the same sky. Shops would change hands. Buildings would be renovated, repainted, reimagined. And yet, beneath every layer of renewal, the past would remain, quiet but enduring, a reminder etched into the foundation of the place. Because some stories do not belong only to those who lived them. They become part of a landscape, part of a collective consciousness, shaping behavior, influencing choices, guiding caution. The Texas 2003 cold case would live on not just as a legal record, but as a warning, a testament to vigilance, to persistence, to the human refusal to forget. In the end, the true legacy of the case was not found in verdicts or headlines, but in the silent promise made by a community that no life would vanish unnoticed, that no question would be left unasked, that even in the deepest darkness, there would always be those willing to search for light. And so, as the town finally exhaled, as the echoes of the trial dissolved into memory, the story settled into its final form, not an ending, but a vigil, an enduring watchfulness, a reminder that truth, no matter how long it sleeps, never truly disappears. It waits,